Hello, everybody. Welcome to well, we don't know what the name of this hangout is yet. It's a brand new hangout series that we're starting. But we're going to take this opportunity for a special live event that nobody saw coming because I just didn't even really advertise it very much. But I've been thinking a lot about the Hangout series that we're doing and the ways in which we are presenting science to you guys, to both this channel and to other platforms as well. And it occurred to me that there's a few discrepancies there's a few niche audiences that we could we still haven't reached with our hangouts, and so we want to try and do this. For those of you who don't know, my name is Tony Darnell. I work at Deep Astronomy Space, and we do hangouts every week, usually on Thursdays, sometimes mostly on Wednesdays too, and now we may be doing them again on Tuesdays with a different hangout series. So this hangout, and going back to what I said about hangout niches, one of the things I'm very proud of with what we do with these hangouts here at Deep Astronomy is we bring professional astronomers straight to you guys where you can interact with them live. You can ask them questions, and they will answer your questions about a variety of topics. We have the Future in Space Hangout every first and third Thursday of the month, where we talk about the future of not just astronomy and space telescopes, but also human flight in space, human exploration in space. And then on off Thursdays, the second and fourth Thursday of every month, we also talk about the latest discoveries in astronomy with our Astro Coffee Hangout, where Carol Christian will pick a paper that's just been published. We will discuss the science with those astronomers directly. We also have Telescope Talk on Wednesdays, where we talk about amateur astronomy. But now I thought, gosh, what about ground-based astronomy? We have plenty of stuff going on with space, but there's also a lot of really cool things going on the ground, on the surface of the Earth, around the world. And I wanted to have a hangout series that focused on that. So I have some people here to help me present these hangouts to you. We are going to probably start in earnest either late August or early September. We're still working on a start date. This is a preview of the kind of things that we'll talk about. But we'll definitely be doing these probably on a bi-weekly basis, where we talk about ground-based astronomy, ground-based observatories, ground-based technology for finding not only exoplanets but black holes. The Event Horizon Telescope comes to mind. Lots of things that we can talk about coming up in future hangouts. But I made a friend today. Well, not today, but over the past 10 years, I've made a friend. And let me bring him up now. He is right up there with me. His name is Christian Ready. Hi, Christian. Hi. Do you like Christian or Chris? Do you care?
I really don't care. Either one's good.
I forgot to ask
somehow almost always go with Christian just because there's always more than one Chris around, but I'm happy to be Chris. That's fine.
Oh, good. Well, Christian Ready runs a YouTube channel himself. It's called Launchpad Astronomy, and so there's a link to it in the description box of this video, and I would highly encourage you to go check him out. He is a kindred spirit, somebody who has followed my work since I've gotten started. He's interacted with me. He's helped me out with comments and suggestions, and we finally met today. We wanted to work together in some capacity to help each other out, and so we've decided that one way in which we can work together is via doing these hangouts together, and he's going to help me with the ground-based telescope hangouts, which we don't have a name for yet, but which we could use your help in getting one. And no, I don't want Hangouty McHangout Face as a name for this hangout. I want something good, but I'm definitely take all suggestions. So leave questions or leave comments in the description box of this to help us name this hangout, because we have a couple of weeks before we go live with it. Anyway, Christian runs Launchpad Astronomy. Definitely subscribe. He makes high quality videos, but he's also a lecturer at Towson University in Maryland, and I will let him introduce himself. Hi, Christian. Welcome, and it's good to have you on as a cohort.
Wow, Tony, thank you so much for having me on, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I mean, Tony, just what you just said, I've been a fan of Tony, of your work for over a decade now, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I can grow up to be, big and awesome just like him someday. So here I am. I decided to begin my own YouTube channel, or actually I've had my YouTube channel since 2006. But after putting up some lectures that were just intended for my students, I started getting some engagement, and I thought, maybe I can do a little bit more YouTube. I really had a lot of fun putting those videos together, and I'm still having a lot of fun doing that. One of the video topics that seemed to gain a fair amount of traction on my channel was a video I made about future telescopes. And I thought, well, maybe I could dig a little bit deeper into some of these individual telescopes. So I was talking about the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, Giant Magellan Telescope, 30-meter telescope, and I've now almost done a video on the extremely large telescope because telescopes are named really
they're really not imaginative, telescope. Are they? I'm waiting for the ultra mega telescope. That's what I'm waiting for. It's like the ultra mega super.
I'm waiting for the "Are you kidding me?" telescope, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm hardly an expert on all of these individual telescopes, but the thing is about teaching is that you learn stuff very quickly that way. And I have been teaching at Towson University for a few years now, and I love it. And so I'm looking to do more on YouTube to support my teaching habit.
Yeah, good. And I also, I consider myself an educator, but I've never done it formally in a classroom, but I have done it informally in a classroom over many years. There was a time when I lived in Colorado before I got my degree in physics where I actually went to schools. I had a nonprofit called Rocky Mountain Science Center in Denver where I would go to schools and give like a Mr. Wizard type show. I had a portable planetarium, a star lab, which I took to schools and did talks that way. And so I've always done it from not being a certified teacher perspective, but at the same time, it's a core interest of mine, and that's why I do what I do. I feel like educating people is extremely important, especially in this day and age. So we are teaming together to do these Hangouts, but we may also be teaming together in the future. We just talked about this before we started the Hangout on maybe making some online courses, not only for the general public, but for teachers as well. So look for that kind of stuff coming down the pike. So lots of things that we could be doing together. I really, like I said, I want to make sure that you know about his YouTube channel and definitely check him out. How often do you post videos, Christian?
I try to post once a week.
Yeah.
I'd like to see if I can increase that maybe to twice a week. But at least once a week.
And your videos are mostly like they're narrated behind the scenes kinds, or not behind the scenes, but you pick a topic and you narrate that.
Yeah, I speak to that topic, and I'm experimenting with a couple of different formats. I noticed you've done the same thing. You've done like the documentary style, narration, and I've done some of those as well. My next video is is going to be of that style, but I've also done just some appearing on camera and trying not to look so morbidly pale, but then again,
two white guys talking astronomy, folks. That's what you got.
Yeah, and you could just see we got a split screen up now. You could just see Tony's got these beautiful, warm, gorgeous colors, and I'm black and white. Yes, even my picture here is black and white.
But it's a telescope, right? Well, that's a refractor. That's a refractor. That's a telescope, right? It's a refractor.
Yes, this is the Sproul 24-inch refracting telescope, which at the time was located at Swarthmore College. And Swarthmore College, this was actually my first job. Actually, it's my second job. I had a paper route before that. But when I was 13 years old, I rode my bike over to Swarthmore College and I knocked on the door. And I'm not kidding. This guy comes out, this German astronomer comes out. He's like right out of Central Casting. And I said, "Hi, I'd like to know if you could use any help." And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I was a kid. I was measuring the distances or helping to determine the distances to nearby stars using astrometry and parallax measurements. This was the instrument that we made those images with, all done on photographic plates. So it was old school
Yeah.
even then.
And one of my first jobs was at a planetarium, a school district planetarium. So I've had experience with that as well. So although that we didn't have that telescope, there was a 20-inch refractor at the University of Denver, though. It's still there. That is really cool. So yeah. All right. Before we get to our topic, I want to let you guys know we got things we can interact with you with. We are talking. I got the live chat up, and a couple of you found us already. Ratko Mladic, hooray. He's also going, hello, Tony Baloney. Yeah, I've never heard that one. Thank you. Thank you, Ratko. I can't pronounce this one, but something Coops. Been doing some astrophotography lately using a DSLR only at the moment. Looking forward to getting a good telescope. I remember a hangout maybe 2 months ago all about telescopes. I'll rewatch it. Yeah, you'll also want to check out Telescope Talk on Wednesdays, every other Wednesday. We've got one tomorrow where we're going to talk. We can take questions too. So, any plans on pointing telescopes with infrared filters to the Earth to see how far you can see across the Earth? Okay, that's a good question. So let's get started with our topic: ground-based observatories. What can they do? What are they good for? Why are we building all of the, and where are we building them, and why are we building them, and what are some of the big ones coming up? We'll try to touch on a little bit of this as we go through the hour. But let's start with this Wizlaws 2 question about infrared wavelength on the ground.
Yeah.
That's not so good.
That's really... Go ahead, Tony. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Go ahead. No, go ahead and comment.
Okay. No, I mean, the infrared astronomy is really where you need to be if you want to understand, anything going on behind the scenes. Everything that we see in the sky, most of it's obscured by dust, and you've got to figure out what's going on behind all that dust to understand things like how stars are forming, how planetary systems are forming, and not only that, and so you have to go into the infrared rather to see through that dust. Another major challenge, of course, is that whenever you are trying to probe the early universe, you have to look very, very deeply into the far distant universe. And that means you are now dealing with galaxies that are racing away from you at ever increasing speed the farther back you go. So much so that they're completely redshifted all the way out, effectively out of the optical part of the spectrum and into the infrared part of the spectrum. So yeah, you really have to have infrared capability. There's just one problem though, and that is we have water vapor in our atmosphere, which destroys our ability to really image well in the infrared. So we have to come up with some ways to get around this problem. One way is to go up into space, and we've done that with the Spitzer Space Telescope. It's been great and successful. The problems with space are pretty obvious, right? There's only so much aperture you could fit into a rocket fairing. There's only so long you can hope to keep a space-based infrared telescope going before the coolant runs out and it's no longer useful. So now you're left on the ground. So we have to figure out some workarounds with the ground. So the first workaround is we get above as much of the atmosphere as possible. We send our telescopes, we locate the telescopes on top of the highest mountains, or if not the highest mountains, certainly underneath the driest of skies. That's workaround number one.
And there's a number of places on Earth where that's ideal. You get both.
Yes.
You get high elevation and dry skies, and you tend to see telescopes congregated there. Places like Chile, the Andes Mountains are very good, very dry, very high places. Mauna Kea on Hawaii. We see a lot of people on Mauna Kea for that very reason. You might not think Hawaii as a dry place, but up at 11,000 feet, it is. And so, and it's also above the clouds there as well. So
you're above about. I think at Mauna Kea you're above. I think it's something like 40% of the Earth's atmosphere. So you're right, Tony. You really are above, that lower cloud deck. Where basically most of the weather takes place, which is not to say it never gets cloudy there. It does. Atacama Desert in Chile, that is roughly 6,000 feet above sea level, so it's considerably lower, but it's a super dry climate. That means, which is odd because Chile is it's a coastal country, but nevertheless, they have really dry air. So being high and dry is the first way to get around the problems with water vapor destroying our view of the sky, particularly in the infrared. The second way we get around the big problem, of course, is to employ a relatively new technology called adaptive optics. I suppose your audience probably knows a lot about adaptive optics. I'm sure they know more than I do, but just for those. Yeah, but if it's something you may not have heard before, it's a technology that was developed by the military. The Air Force wanted to be able to track Soviet spacecraft, and they needed a way to combat the twinkling of starlight, or in the case of their purposes, the spacecraft roiling in the air, the image roiling in the air under the turbulence. So they developed a way to kind of deform the mirrors in real time against the turbulence in the atmosphere. This corrected the light waves and brought everything back to a focus. So this technology has been perfected and improved over the decades, and it's really come a long way now. It's gotten to the point where the telescopes that are now under construction, between their large apertures and between that and their adaptive optics capability, they will be able to outperform the Hubble Space Telescope in the infrared. So I think, for example, the extremely large telescope will be able to have like a 16-fold increase over the Hubble Space Telescope, but at infrared wavelengths. At the optical, maybe not so much, but that's because it's much harder to correct in real time for distortions at optical wavelengths or visible light wavelengths. But like I said, if you really want to understand what's going on in the universe, you really have to work in the infrared.
Right, and when I was in college in the early 2000s, one of my astrophysics professor, he said the future of astronomy is in the infrared, and you've heard me say that many times on this channel as well. And that the reason for that is that one big reason is that the detectors to detect these wavelengths have really come into their own. The biggest one right now is Mercad telluride detectors. These are mercury, telluride, and cadmium based detectors that are very sensitive to the infrared in a way that lets you take really high quality small pixel images without a lot of noise. But they do need to be cooled quite a bit to get these images. And the adaptive optics that Christian was talking about is also important because in the atmosphere, those of you who don't know of what they are, the atmosphere is always above us, and it's kind of boiling and roiling when it gets warm with air currents and wind, and that really degrades a pinpoint image like a star or an extended image like a nebula or a galaxy. And what we want to do is take out those boiling effects of the atmosphere, and they do that using something called adaptive optics. And we'll talk about this more in the Hangout, the details of what they do. But basically, they cancel out instantaneously whatever it is that the telescope is looking through, the column of air, and that they're doing it so well now that it's rivaling, as Christian said, the Hubble Space Telescope, or the telescopes that are in space. So there's a lot going on the ground, and there are a lot of advantages to doing things on the ground, the least of which is, we all know about JWST. Here's my t-shirt. We all know it's going to be hopefully launched sometime in our lifetimes. but it can't be serviced, can it? Once it launches, if it breaks down or if it breaks, that's it. We can't do anything about it. So on the ground, that's not the problem. You can definitely repair things. You can also upgrade things easily. So if we are getting to a point now in our golden age of astronomy where we can now do the things we used to do in space, only now we can do them on the ground. There are some things we can't overcome, though. The atmosphere is opaque in the infrared at certain wavelengths, and we can't get around that. The atmosphere just blocks it. And so there's no filter, no nothing that you can put on there that would let you see into the infrared. Same is true for ultraviolet. You've got to get up into space to see the ultraviolet. So there's some
X-ray,
things.
gamma ray.
That's right, the shorter wavelengths.
Just cannot do it from the ground.
Yep. So there's some things that ground-based telescopes will never be able to do. And if you look at the Hangouts recently where we're talking about this upcoming decadal survey, we're looking at things like LUVOIR and we just did there's HABEX coming up. We just did one on the Origins Space Telescope. These are all telescopes trying to do something that absolutely can't be done from the ground. And so that's going to be their niche going forward. And they know this with future telescopes.
Mm-hmm.
Earth Angel,
every telescope has its own unique set of capabilities. I mean, they're designed for very specific purposes, which is odd because some of these telescopes are general purpose, and yet there's specific capabilities that they are designed with. And so there's an awful lot. What you end up with, ideally, is a whole lot of overlap, but not duplication. So, it's more like a Venn diagram as opposed to just, okay, I'm going to copy what this other telescope's doing. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. And I think we're in for a real exciting decade or two coming down the road very soon.
On the ground. Yes, I agree. And
on the ground.
Let's get to Earth Angel's question. Knowing that hacking into Lucifer has been done, why won't these private and or tax-paid giant space telescope operators allow the public e-access if we pay for it? Why are they bogarts? Well, that's a good question. You've heard about SLOOH, I hope. SLOOH. That is a telescope that you can get access to. You can operate over the internet. So that's already something. But why won't they do this with the general public? Well, so far.
Do you want to maybe go back? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to summarize the hacking of Lucifer? Do you know what?
Maybe you'll go ahead. Yeah, because I'm not very familiar with it.
I don't know either. That's what I was asking.
I don't know what it is. Something got hacked, but I get the point.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but that is a good question. What do you mean by that, guy? I'm going to ask for some clarification. But there's two things going on there. There's a hacking going on, like presumably you can hack into these telescopes, and why won't they allow for electronic access? Well, one to prevent hacking might be one. But these things are pretty complicated. I mean, let me just show you a picture of what the LSST is going to look like. Let me turn this off. So here's a picture being built of LSST, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope. It's going to be enormous. It's going to be complicated, and it's going to have a lot of components to it, and it's designed to do a very specific thing. It is designed to image the entire sky. I think it's going to get a picture of the entire sky every 3 days.
Right.
And that's everything. It's not a point and shoot telescope. And the reason they're doing it this way is it's called a survey telescope. These are telescopes that look at the sky over and over and over again every single night to look for things like asteroids that move, things like supernovae that go off, and they also want to map the motions and the locations of galaxies to try to get a handle on dark energy. So they want wide field areas of the sky taken over a long time series. And that's what LSST is going to do. And the science that it'll be doing, we'll talk about also a little bit briefly. But that's not going to lend itself to getting online time to log in and say, ooh, I want a picture of the Andromeda Galaxy using LSST. That's not what it's going to be built for. Now, other telescopes that currently exist, like Keck on Mauna Kea, the Blanco telescope in Chile, the Gemini telescopes in Paranal in Chile, and the ones that ESO operates. All of these telescopes are point and shoot, but you've got to apply for time on these telescopes. Right. You're not just going to be able to walk in and say, hello, I'm an astronomer, I want to use your telescope. That's not how it works. These things are oversubscribed. These things are in high demand by astronomers, and they've got real science questions they're trying to answer. So if you as a person wanted to use them, I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you could make a really good science case for why you wanted to use the Gemini telescope or the Subaru telescope, you could do it and submit your proposal like all the other astronomers do to a time allocation committee, and they will decide whether or not their telescope would be best served by you. Now, Christian, you were telling me one of your first jobs at the Institute was something similar to that, wasn't it? You were deciding on time allocation for Hubble.
Right. I played a role called a program coordinator when I was at the Space Telescope Science Institute. So Tony and I were both at the same institution, just separated by, I think, like a decade or so. But I was working down there to basically take these proposals. So the whole Hubble is, of course, oversubscribed. I think it's like 10 to 1. And there was a time allocation committee that would triage all these things and award time, or rather more appropriately, they would award orbits.
Right. That's a unit of time in
right.
Hubble land.
and then they would tell the astronomer, congratulations, you've been awarded so many orbits of HST time. go make your phase 2 proposal. So the phase 2 proposal was the astronomers' attempt at figuring out exactly what they wanted to have done on the telescope when it was pointing at their target. And my job was to help take those requirements and translate those into actually, how we're going to make the telescope do this. That usually involved doing things like, well, making sure I could fit everything into the allocated time. Funny enough, they always wanted the telescope to do more than they were often given time to do. What do you know? There is also the minor problem of figuring out things like, what filters we're going to use, how we're going to orient the spacecraft to make sure there's enough power on the solar panels. And guide stars, making sure there are actually some stars that we could lock onto using the FIDE and guidance sensors and keep the telescope perfectly pointed at their target at all times. So that was actually a little bit harder than it would seem. It was a fair amount of, a lot of times it was trial and error and making educated guesses. And then, of course, working with the scheduling team to ensure that we could get things done when they needed to be done. And then after all that work was done, then something really interesting would happen, like a target of opportunity would take place, and the observation that I'd spent the last 5 months working on would be, postponed. And so that just was part of the job, it was part of the gig. And I'd have the honor of telling the astronomers, hey, guess what? You're going to be delayed by this amount of time. So that's how it worked for HST. Now, the way it works for ground-based telescopes, though, is, as Tony said, it's very similar. You have a time allocation committee, and you submit your proposal. And if you're very lucky, you do a phase 2 proposal, which is a bit more specific. And then if you're really, really lucky, you'll get an email saying, hey, your observations have been done. This link to download your data.
Yeah. And
so that's a major thing with ground-based telescopes. Astronomers don't really go out to observatories that much anymore. It does happen occasionally, depending upon the type of observations that need to be done.
I don't know about that. I think they still go. They're not sitting there looking through an eyepiece anymore, but they are generally overdoing their observations.
So, for example, if you need to travel, if your observation requires traveling to, say, the Keck telescopes, you don't actually go up to the summit of Mauna Kea. You go about halfway up to a way station. That's where the astronomers go. So there's somebody up on the mountain who's, as you said, you're right, Tony, no one's at an eyepiece, but they're actually in the control room of the telescope. The astronomers are in another control room halfway up the mountain. I don't even know why they bother going halfway up. I don't know why they just don't.
Well, in many observatories, maybe not in Mauna Kea, but in many observatories, that capability doesn't exist. At the Blanco 4 meter, for example, in Cerro Tololo, where I went, their infrastructure, they were still using Sun computers about 6 years ago, and their internet connections were not that great. But think about it in a minute, that you've got a 500 megapixel camera sitting at the back of a telescope. That's a lot of data. So you take it, and the astronomer wants to look at it right away to make sure, first of all, there's a good data, and second of all, can they do a quick calibration on it to make sure it's what they wanted. And it's not a simple matter to just transfer gigabytes or terabytes of data on a given night off the mountain and into your hard drive onto your computer in an office somewhere. So at least at Cerro Tololo, we had to go. And what you got were your data on hard drives. You brought them yourselves, and you put them on there, and you took them down. And so Earth Angel, that goes to the point where I think you're saying, what you also follow up comment, well, it wouldn't be for just anyone to access, but professors. It's fully bogus to X the entire global population out of regular access. They control all ages and education. I get what you're saying. You think that these things should be more available to the public, or to the people who are paying for them, or at least to, I guess, professors that know what to do with these telescopes. And it's not like people are trying to prevent access. It's that there aren't that many in the world. There are more coming, but access is limited to even professionals. Professional astronomers who want to use these telescopes can't get on them themselves. So, but there are, I guess what I'm trying to say is, there are general public things that you can get access to, like the SLU telescope. But these multi-million-dollar, $100 million ground-based telescopes with 30-meter diameters are, yes, governments are spending this money, taxpayers are spending money on this, but they're doing it. What's justifying it is the science that can be done from them. And if someone wanted to propose, I want to build a 10-meter telescope on a mountain somewhere to make it available to the general public, if you could get that funded, you could do that. But they're just highly oversubscribed right now for even the people who know what to do with them.
I mean, the good news is that, just about all these observatories, I think, in fact, I don't know of any that don't do this, but they make all that data publicly available. So the raw data, now it's not the same thing as, your data, right? You getting an observation made that you wanted to have done, but you can at least, if you're saying, hey, I want to see what this telescope did with Neptune. Well, you can go into the public archive and you can download the data. It's raw data, but you can certainly download it and work with it. And astronomers do that a lot. That's actually a major way. When I was doing research, part of what I was doing was, it was about 50% new data, actually about 40% new data, about 60% archival data. That's a very important way to do astronomy, because, as Tony, as you just said, there just aren't enough telescopes to go around, and there's not enough time on those telescopes to go around.
Yeah,
so what do? You borrow someone else's time. You use their data.
One big ground-based effort that everybody's very excited about is the Event Horizon Telescope. That was a Earth-sized telescope they used interferometer, I've talked about on Space Fan News, where they've tried to image the event horizon of the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. Well, one of the telescopes, and a crucial component of that network, was the ALMA telescope, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array. It sits high in the Atacama Desert. It is one of the most oversubscribed telescopes on the planet. It lets you take very high resolution images for the first time in millimeter wavelengths, and it is highly sought after because they are very helpful for helping you find things like look through grains of dust, or look at grains of dust in between the interstellar space. They're very good at seeing protoplanetary disks and things like that. And the reason it was so helpful for the Event Horizon Telescope was that it was able to get through the gunk that's between us and the center of our galaxy and help us image it, because optical wavelengths, infrared wavelengths, are hopeless to get through to the center of the galaxy in the way they needed to do it. So these telescopes are incredibly oversubscribed, and almost didn't even happen for the Event Horizon Telescope because there was just too many people clamoring for it. So all of this is an argument for more stuff on the ground, as well as in space. But I think depending on I think JWST is going to be a watershed moment for space telescopes. WFIRST is supposed to follow it, but if it screws up, I think if it doesn't launch, or if it blows up, or if it doesn't deploy, or something awful happens, I think that's going to be the end of space telescopes for a very long time. And
I don't see how they're going to say, hey, no problem, let's build another one.
I've had hangouts where we've been talking about, super sized, super deployable space mirrors that make JWST look like a department store telescope. So these things they're planning, hundreds of meters in size. They're never going to happen if JWST blows up. And so
not unless an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or somebody wants to do it for us,
Yeah, exactly. Private people doing it. And I should point out that the private sector is got a big component to LSST. And let's talk about some of the future telescopes, Christian. So one of the first that's coming up is called LSST, the Large Synoptic Sky Survey. That's actually a corporation that is getting its funding from lots of places. The National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, believe it or not, which is weird, but they're funding it. And a lot of private people. I think Paul Allen
is a major investor.
Yeah. So.
Bill Gates he was an early investor, or maybe I'm thinking of TMT. But actually, just to elaborate briefly, come back to LSST. But I know that the Giant Magellan Telescope has a corporation behind it. LSST has a corporation behind it, and TMT, the 30-meter telescope, all these are all nonprofit corporations, mind you, but still they're corporations because they know that that's where they got to go get that money. Anyway, so there are some investors in LSST.
Well, the Galaxia, don't feel bad you missed it. I didn't advertise this. She's like, oh, too bad I missed the first half hour.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't
remember what we were saying about JWST blowing up. Well, if I combust,
that's not why I did it. I just
spontaneous combustion.
I wasn't sure how, first of all, how long we were even going to be on, but this is a test hangout, Galaxia, for those of you who are just joining us. This is an inaugural episode of a future series that's coming out in either early September or late August, where it's exclusively about the technologies, discoveries, and the projects coming up solely on the ground, on ground-based astronomy. So that's coming up. We are going to have a team of people helping us put these together, and we're going to be talking about various projects coming up. And Christian Ready and I just met online today, but we've known each other for a while, and he's an educator at the university, or at Towson University in Maryland. And I don't know, I just think we got a lot in common, and we can do a lot of good work together. I would like to point you to his YouTube channel, Launchpad Astronomy. The link is in the description box. Check it out, subscribe to him, watch his videos. He does really good work. And so check him out, and he's going to be on this hangout, which we need your help with. We need a name for it, because you see this little thing I've got down here, it just says ground-based astronomy. We need a good name, and we're probably going to do this on Tuesday nominally, only because of Christian's teaching schedule. But a lot of this is still being worked out, and some of the potential topics that we're going to discuss are things like the extremely large telescope, the LSST, the 30-meter telescope, the TMT, the
new instrumentation,
right? How do adaptive optics work? What are the challenges of doing astronomy on the ground? What are the good things about it? What are the bad things about it? What can we see from the ground using, and what can, and we'll delve into specific things like dark energy and dark matter. What can we learn from telescopes on the ground from those perspectives?
We'll also talk science. It's not just an engineering thing.
Right.
But,
that's right. But I would like to cover it all because it's all very interesting, and it's something I get a lot of comments about, a lot of queries about. So I want to definitely cover that as well. And also exoplanets. Why are they confirmed from the ground when they're discovered from Kepler? Why do they do it that way? Things like that. So we'll cover a lot of these things. And today this is just kind of an inaugural hello. And I wanted to introduce you to Christian because he's been doing some really good work, and he's also going to join us in future hangouts. So that's why we're doing this today, Galaxia. So there.
Well, the reason why I do what I do is because there's this guy on YouTube called Tony Darnell. He is fantastic. And I just said, hey, man, I want to be like him. So, but thanks, Tony. I appreciate it. And this is fun. Is fun. You have such a great audience, man. There's a couple of questions here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Philip W. asks, question for the panel. Okay, following a comment from Earth Angel, would science comms for astro observations be served better by having a go-to proper site and social media for the public? Oh, so getting the word out with social media, getting the word out with public-facing websites, things like that. I think the short answer to that is yes, they would definitely be better served by that. But if you go on Twitter, you're going to see Twitter accounts for the Giant Magellan Telescope, LSST, TMT, and all those. Public outreach is a big part of it. Although one of the public outreach avenues we'd like to offer those organizations is right here on this Hangout.
What do you mean by a proper go-to site? A go-to proper site and social media for the public? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Because like one thing I would point out is that the Hubble Space Telescope has an account called Hubble Telescope Live. If you subscribe to them on Twitter, it'll tell you what it's looking at and for whom, what it's currently pointed at and doing. I don't know about other places. But science comms, science communicators, for astro observations, it would be better served by having a proper go-to site. That would be an interesting idea. I don't understand exactly what you mean, but the problem with a lot of observatories, and we've talked about this in Telescope Talk, when you take images that night from a telescope and you download them onto your computer, a lot of work has to be done to make them even usable. And that can take a while. One of the challenges, and this will be a topic in a future Hangout, is that we're talking terabytes of data per night coming out of LSST, for example. And that you don't just copy onto a hard drive. You need gigabit scale networks. You need terabyte, petabyte scale storage. And you've got to have supercomputers to handle this data and process it in a reasonable amount of time. And then you can almost bet no human eyes are laying eyes on any of these images. There's just too many. So there's not a whole lot to see initially when you take an image. It's generally when they do something called a data release. And the Sloan Digital Sky Survey is an example of this. They've been around since forever. And they mapped a lot of the galaxies in the sky where they could see. But they would take data over months. And then they would process all that data and then do a data release. What was the telescope that just did a data release? It was
Gaia.
Gaia, thank you. It was Gaia. Gaia just did a data release where they have to. That's the satellite that the European Space Agency is operating that is looking at the sky and measuring very accurately all the stars that are out there. And they just did a data release, and then when that becomes public, then everybody can get access to it, including just any Joe that wants to see it can download it. Sometimes data has embargoes, but it's never more than a year, and that's just to give astronomers a chance to write a paper. It's not to be, it's so they can't be scooped, right? I mean, if you're awarded, think about it. If you get a grant from the NSF to pay of so many millions of dollars for observing time, you get your data and then you make it public right away, and then somebody else takes their data and publishes your paper first. Well, that's not a good incentive for you to go out and ask for telescope time. So you get ownership of your data for about a year usually, and then it gives you time to write your paper. But you better get your paper out because that data is going to be public after the embargo's over.
It's an incentive, publish.
Right. Yeah, and it costs money. Now, Hubble time is different. If you get Hubble time, it's structured such that, I think, and Christian, you can correct me, that's paid for. You don't have to pay. If you're awarded 10 orbits of Hubble time, you don't have to actually pay for that.
Actually, they'll pay you. I mean, in other words, you'll get a grant. Like the Space Telescope Science Institute funds grants to basically pay astronomers to do the work needed to make the Hubble observations. And some of these other observatories, even the ground-based ones, can all have similar programs. So yeah, you're right. That's because you got to make a living, you got to eat.
Yep.
You got to pay grad students. You got to pay. You got to buy equipment. You got to get. If you don't have the workstations needed, like the Sun workstations from back in the day. You had to get all that gear together. You have to travel. You got to go to meetings. You got to present the stuff. You got to publish. Well, publishing often involves paying the publisher. So there's a lot that has to get done, and that money's got to come from somewhere. So either you're coming to the institution with a grant, saying, "Hey, I've got this pot of money. I can spend it to do science with your telescope," or the organization running the telescope gives you grant money.
Yeah. Did you guys know that if you wanted to publish a paper in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, you have to pay for that yourself, or at least your institution has to pay for that, and it costs a lot of money, on the order of thousands of dollars to get a paper published. So an astronomer working on his own in his home office isn't affiliated with an institute or a university of some kind has to pay for that out of his own pocket unless he has a grant. Then the grant will pay for it. But I bet you didn't know that. You have to pay thousands of dollars, and it's a real contentious point. Or lately, what a lot of journals are starting to do is that now they're charging you to be able to read the article. So if I point you to an article on Space Fan News, I've done this before, and in order to all you can read is the abstract and maybe a couple of figures. But if you want to see the whole paper, you've got to pay like $45, and that's becoming an issue.
There's a couple of free journals out there. My friend publishes in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society. He's not British. He's American. He lives and works in Wyoming. Why does he publish there? Because they don't charge anything. They're funded they're funded by Parliament, I guess. I don't know. Earth Angel had a question: who funds those grants? Need links, links, links. So yeah, Facebook community page for this. Well, as Tony was saying, some of these grants are coming from the government. National Science Foundation is a source, although that's dwindled. NASA provides grant money for some of their telescopes, like Hubble and so forth. As far as the ground-based institutions, they're going to come usually through. They're going to be. Remember, I mentioned before that there were these organizations like the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope Corporation, the Giant Magellan Telescope Corporation, so forth. These corporations are nonprofit corporations. They have money flowing through them, and then they funnel that out to say, okay, here's some grant money for you to go do the science needed that you want to do with our telescope.
Yeah. Philip W. is I think, elaborating. A site where the public, not necessarily science-minded, could go to where all the processed images, data, and research has been disseminated in the form of infographics, YouTube videos, and facts. That would be a lot of work, Philip W. That would be a lot of work. But you know what? That looks like an opportunity. All of this stuff is generally in the public domain. Very few people copyright data. And while the papers themselves will be copyrighted by the journals that publish them, you could publish links to them. You could also go to app with this. There's a site called AstroPH, which I don't know if you guys know about. It's a free. It's run by Cornell, and it's a listing of all the people put their papers up there before they print to let people know that this paper is coming. It's called a preprint site. And you can read a lot of the upcoming papers. I use it as a source for Spaceman News, for example. Just do a search. It's AstroPH, and you can look up these papers. But we're running out of time, and we haven't really talked about any telescopes yet. Let me show you an image of the optics of JWST. I'm sorry, JWST, LSST. I'm showing this graphic you sent me, Christian, on the optical train of LSST. This thing is huge, but the primary mirror at the bottom, it's got two different figures on it. It's got a slightly shallower focal point, and then it's like a mirror within a mirror. It's two mirrors in one.
Right.
Okay. There's this outer band that has a certain focal length, and then there's this other concave surface in the center that is further that has got an even shorter focal length, and you can kind of see where the light paths with the arrows go. The light comes in from the sky, goes up to that outer ring, goes and reflects off of the first, and the secondary is equally complicated, and then it goes down to that second inner ground mirror, and then goes back up to a second focal point where the instrumentation lies. This is all one piece of glass. It's not like JWST or the Keck telescope where they have these segments. This is one piece of glass that has been that has been built, and I think they're done with it. I think they've finished the primary, haven't they?
Right. So there's three mirrors here, right? The outer band is the M1 mirror, the secondary is M2, and that inner cup is M3. So yeah, as Tony said, right, as you're saying, Tony, there's two mirrors in one here. So both the secondary has been figured, and I believe it's polished. The M1, M2 has been cast and is currently undergoing polishing, if I understand correctly. And that cylinder in the center, that's the camera. That's the instrument for this telescope, because this is strictly a survey telescope. It's going to take, I think, one exposure it's going to take a 15-second exposure. Every pointing it makes, it'll take two 15-second exposures. Then I think it takes about 5 seconds to slew to the next patch of the sky and take two back-to-back 15-minute exposures. So the only real thing that you can do with this is to swap out filters. You can change your filters. There's a filter wheel up at the top there. And as you can see, it's all got to fit within that cylinder because you don't want to be blocking any of that light. So this mirror was really interesting to make, this M1, M2 mirror, because of that two-part curvature. There's two different prescriptions inside the single mirror, and they pulled it off. This is an 8.4 meter mirror, by the way. This will be the largest single mirrored telescope in the world when it's finished.
And like I said, it's going to be taking a lot of data every single night. Petabytes are going to be coming off of this every week. And if you're looking at a way to make your mark in astronomy, if you want to get a job in astronomy, a very good skill to have is data processing and data handling, because that is where I think the biggest skill set is needed at this point. How to take an image and how to store it, how to transfer it, a lot of that stuff's been worked out. But handling it once it's there, processing it in a reasonable amount of time, using algorithms, compression, whatever, is going to be direly needed. And that not just in astronomy, but in all areas where they call big data is concerned. So this is LSST. It's coming online. When do we have do we have a first light target yet, Christian? Do you know?
Yeah, 2020, I believe, is what they're currently targeting.
A couple years away, and
and
it's located where?
It's located on the Cerro Ranchon ridge in Chile. It's actually going to be not far from, I believe, Cerro Tololo. I could be wrong, but it's fairly close. I mean, one of the reasons they choose these sites is because obviously you got to have these really perfect skies, but they'll accept a little bit less than perfect if it's close enough to infrastructure, because this costs a whole lot of money, so you need roads and people and so on. So this is going to be in Cerro Ranchon, excuse me, in Chile, and 2020. Yeah, I think it's first light. And I think I don't know of any major delays right now. I think they're kind of on track to get it done.
Yeah, when I was working at the Dark Energy Survey, we were handling smaller problems, but my office mate at the time at the University of Illinois was working on the LSST data processing pipeline as well, and we got a lot of good conversations there. And they had a lot of problems. They had a lot of things to overcome, but I think they're all on track to do that now, which is really great. So it's exciting time.
I can't imagine what the pipeline's got to be. Jeez.
It's going to have to gigabit networks. Now, I will say this about the Chilean government, and one of the reasons that you are seeing so many observatories being built down there is that they recognize that this is actually a good contributor to their economy, and the Chileans have really embraced this. When I was in Santiago, it was almost it was an astronomy town. I mean, everybody was working at an observatory down there, and just that's the lower main city that everybody flies into before they drive up the mountains. And there's just the ridges up there are just becoming super populated with observatories of all kinds, and they realize it's a growth industry, and they're doing it now. And I got to hand it to them. I think that's good that they're embracing it. By contrast, Mauna Kea is a sacred mountain on Hawaii for a lot of people there, and there's a lot of controversy in building it. And I believe the 30-meter telescope is trying to get built there. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Is that right, Christian?
That's right. That's the preferred site.
And they've gotten tentative approval, but it's not a done deal yet, as I understand it. Right?
Yeah, it's a a legal mess. But the short version is they were given permission, but then the Supreme Court, the Hawaiian State Supreme Court, said no. Actually, you permission provider did not go through all the proper steps, so they withdrew permission, and then they went through all the proper. The Bureau of Land and Natural Resources, I believe it's called, went through all the proper procedures, satisfying the court. After public hearings, but then the opposition said that actually no, the presiding officer of those public hearings was not a partial, independent judge, because she is a member of some astronomy museum, and therefore is biased. And so, so they just heard arguments on June 21st in the Hawaiian State Supreme Court, and I think the ruling that comes back will basically determine if it's going to be put up there or not. There's a backup site available in the Canary Islands, which is an island that belongs to Spain. It's off the coast of Morocco, I believe.
Another dry, mountainous island.
But not quite as dry.
Right.
Not quite as dry. And that's the key thing. So not quite as dry, and they're trying to do all this infrared work where the every drop of water vapor in the atmosphere counts, or counts negatively. So it's not quite as good, but they do have that backup site ready to go. They've signed an agreement with the Spanish government. They have land allocated, but the TMT organization is really putting all their chips onto onto Mauna Kea, and so keep our fingers crossed for that.
Right, and unfortunately, I think we've seen a lot of the. I think we've seen the end of many of the observatories that are going to get built up there. For this reason, it's just become too sensitive of a topic. Even though one of the sites is the site itself is superb. Okay, I've got this graphic. We're running out of time, so did you want to?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
So I've got this one you sent called ESO 1716F. This is the one with many different observatories on it. You want to walk us through this one?
Sure. I mean, okay. So now what we're looking at are these are all of the next major telescopes that are coming online. So they're all labeled there, and this just
the labels are really. I don't think they're coming through. So let's go ahead and describe them, maybe from right to left.
Okay, sure. Well, going from right to left, we have the extremely large telescope. This is a 39-meter telescope, 39.3 meters. There's an interesting story behind that, which I'm covering in my video. Next to that is, and the 30-meter telescope rises about 76 meters into the air with the dome, etc. The 30-meter telescope, which is a huge telescope. I mean, my goodness, 30 meters just looks like a toy next to it. Then followed by the giant Magellan telescope, and then the teeny tiny, merely an 8.4 meter, holy mackerel, large synoptic survey telescope. So these are illustrations of the enclosures and the structures, and there's an interesting story behind each of these enclosures. They look different from one another, and yet they're all designed with very specific purposes in mind. Part of which, not the least of which, is exactly the geography that they're building it onto. So the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope has like this long tail to it. That's just because of the terraced mountainside that they're building the telescope onto. One thing I can comment on briefly is that if you look, one thing that's very common about all of these enclosures are these vents, that there are ventilation louvers surrounding the domes. Why is that? Well, because you have to make sure that the air that's passing over the mirror is smooth and stable and not turbulent. Because you don't want to go to all this trouble of using your adaptive optics to cancel out the turbulence in the atmosphere above the dome, only to have turbulence inside the dome, ruining your image, right?
It's amazing how long it took them to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a relatively new development, only in the last 20 some odd years or so. And so these louvers are all computer controlled, and they automatically open and close by a certain amount to smooth out that air. It's extremely sophisticated. During the daytime, these domes are air conditioned, believe it or not. They actually have to be kept cool so that they're at the same temperature as the expected nighttime temperatures, so that the mirrors don't bend and warp or anything like that. So yeah, there's an awful lot of HVAC going on to get keep these telescopes running 24/7, day and night. Even though they're not being used during the day, they have to be ready.
Yeah, that's to overcome a thing called dome seeing, which you don't want. It's a bad thing. And if you look at 19th century and early 20th century telescopes, they're all built in these brick or stone buildings where all night long the rock or the brick is just radiating all night long as it gets heat during the day. Even your telescope there that you got over your shoulder, it is not very well ventilated.
No, not at all. That is the ventilation. The
slit in the dome. That's right. So it took a surprisingly long time to figure it out. But then again, the precision wasn't needed until recently, right? It was okay to have a bit of a fuzzy image in your eyepiece if all you were doing was looking through it, trying to see details on Mars or something. But although it did sort of, I think, mislead Schiaparelli when he was looking through his telescope. Well,
Lowell went right down the rabbit hole, didn't he? But,
and Lowell too. That's right.
Yeah,
Percival Lowell.
It's a good point. And in the case here, at least this is a refractor, so your objective is relatively close to the opening. But yeah, I mean, telescopes are these modern observatories they're way more complicated than they used to be.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's it. Okay. Well, I better stop it there. We've been at this about an hour. let us know what you think, guys. Did you like this hangout? We got more planned. With people, with guests and people using the actual telescopes themselves, people from the observatories, people who've been to the observatories. But this is a ground-based observatory hangout, ground-based astronomy hangout. And I like some of your suggestions. One of them was a Terrascope hangout, but then you did a Google on it and thought better about it. I think Terrascope is a spotter scope for somebody. Probably already took the trademark for that. But keep it coming. Keep the ideas coming. Let us know in the comments below what you'd like to call this hangout, because I don't know yet. Harley came up with Future in Space, and Carol came up with Astro Coffee. I came up with Telescope Talk, but
I think that one's taken. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a different Telescope Talk. So anyway, oh God, I'm not even gonna read
Round Telescope Talk.
Round Telescope Talk.
Big glass.
Yeah.
There you go. Big glass.
Big. Oh, that's nice. I like that one.
I like big telescopes, and I cannot lie.
All right, and I want to do, and I also want to thank Christian Ready. He's going to be our new co-host for this hangout. His channel is Launchpad Astronomy. Go check it out. Subscribe to him. Watch his videos. He's posting more space videos than I am. I tend to focus more on these hangouts and space fan news for reasons that I think my Patreon patrons understand. Space videos are becoming sort of the bane of my existence when it comes to YouTube. So they're getting flagged for all kinds of reasons. So I sort of scaled back that for a bit. But anyway, Christian hasn't, so definitely check him out. And thanks, Christian, for joining us. I don't know. What do you think? This will be kind of fun, won't it?
I think this can be a thing. Yeah,
it could be a thing.
I think we can take this on the road. I think we should do these hangouts from those observatories.
Hey, that's a great idea. Let's start a Kickstarter for that, so people can pay for us.
We should get down there and be like on the mountaintop, with our hoodies on.
We'll just rent a house in Chile and right outside of Santana. We'll just drive up to all the different, because that's the place to be. You want to start there. Maybe Canary Islands a couple of times would be nice. Certainly Hawaii.
We could do Mauna. We could do
Mauna Kea. That's nice. Yeah.
There's
a solar observatory on Mauna Loa, which is an active volcano. We should do a hangout on that as well. I work there.
And we can even go to like Kitt Peak and see what's left up there, and
the possibilities are endless. I think you're onto something here, Christian. I like this idea. All right, we're going to be traveling on location to these different ones.
Yes.
All right,
field
folks.
reporter, ladies and gentlemen, all the ships at sea.
Okay, well, I don't have any real graphics for this, so I'm just going to say thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for your comments. Please give us thumbs up or share the videos.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thank you both. On behalf of Christian Ready from Launchpad Astronomy, thank you all so much for watching. And as always, keep looking up.